more about the 90 essential nutrients, but I think it's important for us to talk about, how did you come about, the necessity for the 90 essential nutrients? How did you come to learn of all this?
That's a really, really interesting story. It's a really interesting story. And fate's a funny thing, right? The
Mhm.
road of life is a crooked road. Like what happened with me and, in my profession. If you'd have told me when I was in high school that I was going to be a naturopathic doctor, I would have looked at you cross-eyed. I didn't even know what that was, but here I am, happy as a clam and helping lots and lots and lots of people. So I think it was in the 60s, I think, there was an environmental disaster in Japan. It was called the Minamata disaster, where there was an industrial plant that dumped tons of liquid mercury, which is toxic, into Minamata River. It was a environmental damage, right? They did it on purpose, just trying to get rid of the stuff. So the mercury flows downstream, empties into Minamata Bay, and all of the algae suck it up. And the little minnows eat the algae. The medium-sized fish eat the minnows, and the big fish eat the medium-sized fish. And now there's mercury in the fish, in the entire, all the fish contaminated with mercury. The villagers don't know this. What do the villagers live on? Fish. So as the villagers consumed mercury toxic fish, they developed horrible illnesses, and it was horrible. It was horrible. Lots of people, everybody got sick. Lots of people died. And 9 months later, all of the kids were like Frankenstein. Like they were born with one arm, half a brain, three eyes, three legs. It was horrible. Like horrible birth defects caused by mercury toxicity. It's bad.
Hmm.
Now, it didn't take long before the scientific community figured out it was mercury toxicity. It was pretty easy in this regard to figure that out. But it sent a shockwave through the scientific community because the thought was, well, holy smokes, if mercury can do this, what can everything else that we're dumping into the environment do? I mean, this could be a human extinction event. Could be.
Hmm.
So, a number of organizations put together money. They raised $25 million and started a scientific investigation of the net negative effects on human health and animal health through toxic exposure, through exposure to toxins in the environment. And it was a giant project. And my colleague, Dr. Wallach, who founded the Youngevity company, who I've mentored with for the last 10 years, was in charge of the whole shebang. So for 10 years, Wallach went around the world, did autopsies, did histopathologies, did in research investigations on the relationship between toxicity in the environment and health. And interestingly enough, about halfway through the research, they were coming up empty, which is interesting. You wouldn't think that, but they were. Because as it turned out, the only time that toxic stuff had a really big impact on human health was if it was a giant exposure, like Chernobyl, right? Or Minamata. It was big exposure, big exposure. People working in coal mines, breathing coal dust, asbestos exposure all the time. That was a problem. But as it turns out, we could handle all the other stuff that was in the environment because there wasn't enough of it to make that big of a difference in the short run, anyway. So the research was almost canceled, but Wallach stumbled upon something that he was not looking for, which was the notion or the fact that without the adequate nutrition, without enough minerals and vitamins and 90 essential nutrients in the human body, that pathology developed. And it was Wallach's book, which is in the Smithsonian Institute in the United States now, in Washington, D.C. It's a national treasure, was his compilation of all of this research, which basically changed the game, rewrote the book, literally, not metaphorically or figuratively, literally rewrote our understanding of the relationship between nutrients and disease. And it was Wallach's research that discovered mostly, yeah, there was other people that have done research in this regard as well, but Wallach was really the trailblazer that showed the relationship between these 90 nutrients and human health, and it was a breakthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get to know him then? How did you what was the
Well,
how does that work?
that was another twist of fate. I feel like I'm in a Bob Dylan song, right? A simple twist of fate, right? So, I don't know if you remember, but in the 80s in the United States, the real estate market crashed overnight, and it was bad. It was a really bad crash here, and it affected lots of people. It affected me. I had just taken out a business loan a year before to promote my naturopathic business. I had a brick and mortar practice at the time with treatment rooms and staff and the whole thing, and I was funding that through a loan that I had against real estate that I owned. And everything was hunky dory. I was moving along in my business plan and things were looking good. And then the real estate market crashed. And the bank calls me up and says, "Hey, Doc, that line of credit that you had on the real estate? Well, it doesn't exist anymore because your real estate isn't worth what it used to be." So overnight, I'm out of money. I'm 2 years into my business plan, and I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? I don't know what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Right?
Right.
So, as fate would have it, again, fate, destiny, karma, whatever you want to call it, I'm at a naturopathic medical convention, conference. We have them once a year. And I go to it because that's what I do. And you have to support the cause, and it's continuing education, and it's really pretty great to be around members of people that are doing the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm feeling a little forlorn. Honest to God, I'm being kind of super honest with this conversation, but I think that's my strong suit. So
Me
I don't
too.
I don't know what I'm gonna do, man. I'm sitting on the couch after I just signed in to the convention, and Wallach walks through the door. I'll never forget it. Again, it's one of those things I'll never forget. And I don't know why he said this. And I had known Dr. Wallach because it's a small community of licensed naturopaths in the U.S., but I never really knew what he'd done or his research, or I didn't know any of the background. I just recognized the face, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Wallach walks over to me, and without no previous conversation, nothing, he bends down and he looks at me and he says, multiple streams of revenue are never a bad idea. And he gets up and walks away. And I'm smart enough to know when the universe is knocking on my door. I'm smart enough to know that, right? So
Right.
so these bells start going off in my head, and I go, what just happened? So long story short, I track him down. We have lunch. He tells me what he's up to. He says, "Where do you live?" I told him where I lived. He said, "Oh, I'm going to be giving a lecture about a half an hour away from you in about a month. Why don't you come and check it out?" So I did. So a month later, I'm in the first ever Dr. Wallach lecture I'd ever been to, and my head exploded.
He does that. He'll do that to you, won't he? He will do
Because
that.
it was again one of those moments like I had in the homeopath's office, the naturopath's office, who gave me the homeopathic cure-all. It was one of those moments in time where everything changed for me for the positive, because and it was a humbling experience, because I was in a room with probably 50 lay people, none of whom had college educations, none of whom had doctoral degrees except Wallach and myself. And these people were standing up, giving testimonials about what had happened to their health and what they had done for their family members and people in their churches and people in their communities. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, because I was of the mindset that you could only get results like that if you're a doctor, right? If you're a physician, or you're working with patients. The idea that a layperson could have such remarkable results with generic, right, medical nutrition. My head exploded again. And so when I heard that, I saw that, experienced that, I was all in, and I hitched myself to Dr. Wallach's wagon, learned everything that I could from Dr. Wallach for the next 10 years, and became an outspoken advocate of his research and his methodology and the company that he formed, which was Youngevity, which has, in my opinion, again, remember who you're talking to. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've had access to nutritional supplement companies that you've never even heard of. The really great nutraceutical grade stuff.
Mm.
The products developed and delivered by Wallach and his company Youngevity, hands down, way out in front. No, like the Michael Phelps of medical nutrition, like the Tiger Woods of medical nutrition. Nobody even comes close, is Youngevity. And the stuff that he's put together and that company manufactures, hands down, is the most effective medical nutrition I've ever seen.
Yeah. And why though? What is it, do you think, that separates it? What is it that makes the Youngevity product so good? Is it a combination of the research? Is it a combination of the ingredients that they use? What is it? That makes them so good? Why do they work?
Because Wallach wrote the book on medical nutrition, literally. It's in the Smithsonian. Wallach has forgotten more about medical nutrition than most doctors know. Honest to God.
Right.
So his knowledge base informed the formulation of the products, number one.
Right.
Number two, it's the only nutritional supplement line that provides all 90 essential nutrients. Nobody else
Right.
does that. No, and let me say that again. Nobody else does that.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, before Dr. Wallach became a naturopathic doctor, he was one of the world's leading veterinarian pathologists. And that's why he was tapped to lead that research, because he was the most experienced veterinarian pathologist in the world. And this is again another kind of scientific pearl of insight that seems common sense when you say it, but nobody does it except Youngevity. Because of Wallach's history as a veterinarian, in veterinarian land, when you're formulating nutritional supplements for dogs, the little Chihuahua doesn't get as much as the Great Dane does. The Great Dane gets 5 times more nutrients because he weighs 5 times, 10 times, 20 times as much as the Chihuahua. So the doses, not only of nutrients but also of drugs, right? It's based on the weight of the animal.
Mm.
Wallach was the only person in his company, the only company that promoted the use of nutritional supplements along those lines. And those are the reasons why this stuff works. Because number one, it's all of the 90 essential nutrients. And number two, the doses are based upon your body weight. And number three, the way that they're formulated makes them extremely easy to absorb. For instance, I'm sorry, but let me just segue real quick. If you were to go to the health food store, if you watch one of my videos on high blood pressure and you think that, I should probably supplement with calcium and magnesium because that might help my cardiovascular system. Okay, so you go to the health food store, there's 20 different types of calcium to choose from, right? So most people get the one in the middle. They don't get the cheap one. They don't get the expensive one. They get the one in the middle, right? So if you were to do that, in order for you to fulfill your body's calcium and magnesium needs from the average over-the-counter calcium magnesium supplement, and I've crunched these numbers like 25 times, you would need 70 tablets. 30 tablets a day. 30 tablets a day. There's 60 tablets in the bottle, so you would need 1 bottle every 2 days. Most people
Yeah.
take 2 tablets, not 30. And who's going to swallow 30 tablets? Nobody's going to do that. So that's why people get less than satisfactory results with most over-the-counter nutritional supplements, just because they're not taking enough.
Yeah.
And
And they're not,
Youngevity fixed that problem.
yeah, I was going to say they're not synergized either. This is the other thing that I like about with the Youngevity products, that it's got 60 minerals, 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, and obviously the 3 essential fatty acids in the product too. But I try to explain to people also, because they think they get a bit of vitamin D, or they get they try and cherry pick a little bit with this or that or whatever it's going to be. But I try to say to people, if you eat an apple in nature, it doesn't just come with one nutrient in it. There aren't one nutrient foods, right?
Right.
So, if you rely, so vitamin C might rely on boron and zinc and strontium and all these other things that react in that way in your system in order to be absorbed properly. Is that right? I think that people don't realize that, do they?
And that's the beauty of the 90, because you get everything. And this entire thing is based upon the fundamental naturopathic belief that the human body has intelligence. The human body knows how to fix itself. The human body wants to fix itself. The human body is trying to fix itself, but it needs your help. And you have to eat food. You have to drink water. You have to breathe air. You have to put warm clothes on when you're in cold weather, right? You have to protect yourself from the environment. Well, there's one other thing you have to do. Well, there's 90 other things you have to do, right? And if you
Yeah,
do
exactly.
those, your body will sort it out. And that's the beauty of this approach. You don't need blood testing to help you figure out exactly what nutrients you need. I did that for 7 years before I met Dr. Wallach. I was one of the first naturopathic doctors in the world to do that. Did extensive testing to figure out exactly which nutrients you needed, and then we'd give boatloads of those. And I didn't get nearly as good results as I get with the Youngevity stuff because of the holistic, synergistic nature. And also, there are other little scientific things that come along. For instance, is it with calcium? Because that's something that everybody's familiar with. Is it calcium citrate? Is it calcium malate? Is it calcium hydroxyapatite? What is it? Which form is it?
Right.
And is it in a hard pressed tablet? Is it in a liquid gel cap? Is it in a solid gel cap? Is it a powdered form that you mix with water? Is it a liquid form? All these things make a difference as to how well your body is going to be able to absorb it or not. And to
Yeah.
go back to the calcium supplement, most over-the-counter calcium supplements are 15% absorbable, if you're lucky. 15. Youngevity's liquid calcium is 95%
Yeah.
absorbable.
And
That
that's it, isn't
makes a
it?
difference.
These products the body can actually get at and do something with, and that's why you tend to see the results with these. And I think that was the biggest thing when we first started with them. I noticed it myself, and then family members, and then on to friends, and on and on. And I think that was such a big thing for me. As I say to people all the time, the people are supplementing, and they sort of supplement for the sake of it, because they're taking it because they think it's doing them some good, but they're not really feeling any results from it. And I think that was a big thing. Doc Wallach's message and your message was so coherent. But then at the same time, it's great to have a great story. But if the products are rubbish, it doesn't matter anyway, really, does it? So I think that was what was so refreshing, that you took it and you could genuinely feel like, wow, this is happening. I feel different. My arm feels better. My energy feels better, whatever it is. And I think that's it. And I think we're going to touch on that in some later videos, the different protocols for particular ailments and stuff like that. But I think that's been a really good, background on Youngevity. And if you guys in the UK and Europe are interested in getting at these products directly from the UK and in Europe, check out at the bottom of the page. You've got links to the websites here where you can go on and purchase directly. Thank you greatly for that insight again. That was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed that out there in YouTube land. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for joining us.